You've seen the movie. Lights flicker, mushroom cloud, fade to black. Hollywood just got you killed. Here's what they don't show you. Societal collapse isn't a heart attack, it's a neurological shutdown. The body keeps moving. The brain went dark 20 minutes ago. And while you're scanning the sky for falling planes, the servers have already timed out. The algorithms are already failing. The invisible digital veins that keep civilization running, they started constricting before the first scream. But the lights are still on, so you wait. That's the kill zone. That's where 99% get trapped, waiting for a signal that already came and went. Most preppers prepare for day one. Here's the problem. By day one, you're already 24 hours behind. Today, we're dissecting the first 72 hours. 5 invisible failures. 5 dominoes that fall while the lights are still on. Miss one, and you're a statistic. Let's start the clock. Chapter 1. T plus 4 hours. The ghost in the machine. 4 hours in. The power's still on. Your phone still works, mostly. The TV is showing emergency broadcasts, but the ticker at the bottom keeps glitching. Someone at the station probably went home early, and you're thinking about groceries. Smart. Food is important. Water is important. You should absolutely go get supplies before the panic hits. Except, here's the thing. The panic already hit. 4 hours ago. You just didn't see it because it happened inside a server farm, not inside a supermarket. Let me explain something about the modern American grocery store. It is not a warehouse. It is not a stockpile. It is a display window. A very elaborate, very fragile display window connected to an invisible web of algorithmic predictions, automated orders, and just-in-time delivery schedules that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. Your local Kroger doesn't have a back room full of secret supplies. That back room is a loading dock. Products arrive, products go on shelves, products leave in shopping carts. The cycle repeats every 18 to 24 hours. There is no buffer, there is no reserve, there is only flow. And flow requires data. Here's where it gets beautiful, in a deeply tragic way. The system that keeps your grocery store stocked isn't managed by the guy in the apron. It's managed by predictive algorithms running on servers that might be in Atlanta, might be in Dublin, might be in a bunker somewhere you've never heard of. These algorithms are very good at predicting normal behavior. They know that every Sunday you buy eggs. They know that before a hurricane you buy batteries and bread. They've modeled every panic buying event in the last 20 years, and they've gotten very good at adjusting supply to meet demand. But here's what they can't model: genuine systemic collapse. When the first wave of panic buying hits, and it hits fast, within 4 hours of any credible threat, the algorithms see something they don't recognize. The spike is too sharp. The pattern doesn't match any historical model. And the system does what any confused computer does when faced with data it can't process. It freezes. Not because it's broken, because it's trying to prevent waste. These systems are optimized for efficiency, not resilience. An unexplained spike in demand looks like an error, a glitch, a false positive. So the algorithm does the safe thing. It delays orders, flags the anomaly for human review, and waits for confirmation that will never come. Meanwhile, the shelves are emptying. Not because there's no food in the system, because the system doesn't know where to send it anymore. This is called the bullwhip effect. Small disruptions at the consumer end create massive, amplifying waves of chaos further up the supply chain. A 10% increase in demand at the store level can translate to a 50% swing in orders at the distribution level. The whole chain starts whipping back and forth, overcorrecting, undercorrecting, until the entire thing seizes up like an engine running without oil. And here's the part that really hurts: ghost inventory. The computer says there are 400 cans of beans at the distribution center in Memphis. The store manager sees that number and assumes help is on the way. But those 400 cans? They were sold 3 hours ago to a buyer in another state. The system just hasn't updated yet. The inventory is a ghost, a digital echo of resources that no longer exist. You're standing in an aisle looking at empty shelves, and somewhere in Memphis, a warehouse worker is staring at a screen that says he has plenty of stock. Both of you are wrong, and neither of you knows it. The trucks don't stop because there's no gas. They stop because the SQL database in Atlanta crashed, and the driver sitting in his cab 60 miles away can't get a digital manifest. He's got a full tank. He's got a full trailer. but he can't move because the computer won't tell him where to go. While the lights are still on, while your phone still works, while the emergency broadcasts are still promising that everything is under control, the supply chain has already been severed by a line of code. 4 hours in, and you're already behind. So what do? You don't wait for the shelves to empty. You don't wait for the confirmation that something is wrong. You treat the first credible signal, the first power fluctuation, the first unexplained outage, the first time your banking app throws an error, as the starting gun. Because by the time the starting gun is loud enough for everyone to hear, the race is already half over. And speaking of banking apps throwing errors, Chapter 2, T plus 12 hours, the price of nothing. 12 hours in, the situation is clarifying. The power's still on in some places, out in others. Cell service is spotty. The emergency broadcasts have stopped being reassuring and started being repetitive. And you've got a problem. You managed to get to a gas station before the real chaos hit. Smart. Fuel is mobility, and mobility is options. You've got $500 in cash, actual paper money, the stuff preppers have been hoarding for exactly this scenario. The pump works, the lights are on, there's a clerk behind the counter, and he's not running away. Everything should be fine, but he's not selling. Not to you, not to anyone. He's standing there, watching the line of increasingly agitated customers, and he's got this look on his face. Not fear exactly, something worse, paralysis. And you realize, the money in your pocket means nothing if no one will take it. This is the transaction confidence freeze, and it's about to become your new worst enemy. Here's what the preppers don't tell you about cash. Yes, it's better than cards when the grid goes down. Yes, it's tangible, it's portable, it's universally recognized. But it has one fatal flaw. It only works when both parties agree on what it's worth. In normal times, that's not a problem. A dollar is a dollar. The price on the shelf is the price you pay. The transaction happens in seconds because everyone involved has access to the same pricing information, the same market data, the same shared understanding of value. But when the internet goes spotty, when the credit card machines stop working, when the news is contradictory and nobody knows if this is a temporary outage or the beginning of the end, value becomes a guess, and merchants don't like guessing. Put yourself in the clerk's shoes for a second. He's got a storage tank full of gasoline. Yesterday, that gas was worth $3.50 a gallon. Tomorrow, if things get worse, it might be worth $50 a gallon. Or it might be worthless because everyone's already fled and there's nobody left to buy it. He doesn't know. He can't know. The systems that would tell him, the commodities markets, the wholesale price indexes, the regional supply reports, they're all offline or unreliable. So he's got a choice. Sell now, at yesterday's price, and potentially give away a fortune. Or wait, refuse all transactions, and hope things clarify before the mob outside decides to clarify things for him. He locks the door. Not because he's greedy, not because he's evil, because the economic system that told him what things were worth has developed a stutter, and he's terrified of making a mistake he can't undo. This is called the velocity of money problem. Money only works when it moves. When people are confident about prices, transactions happen fast. Money changes hands dozens of times a day, lubricating the entire economy. But when confidence drops, money stops moving. People hoard, merchants freeze. The velocity drops to zero, and suddenly, it doesn't matter how much cash you have. It matters whether anyone will accept it. You don't starve because you're poor. You starve because commerce has forgotten how to function. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The preppers who hoarded silver and gold, they're in even worse shape. Try walking into a gas station during a crisis and paying with a 1-ounce silver round. The clerk doesn't know what it's worth. He's never seen one before. For all he knows, it's an arcade token. He's not going to accept it. Precious metals are a long-term store of value. They're great for rebuilding after the collapse, when new markets form and people have time to establish exchange rates. But in the first 72 hours, they're expensive paperweights. Cash is better, but goods are better than cash, and skills are better than goods. The person who survives the transaction confidence freeze isn't the one with the fattest wallet. It's the one who figured out 12 hours ago that the rules had changed. The one who converted cash to tangible supplies while the stores were still open. The one who's now sitting on a pile of batteries and antibiotics and water filters while everyone else is arguing with a terrified clerk about the price of gasoline. You had a window. It was about 4 hours long. If you missed it, you're now operating in a barter economy without anything worth bartering. 12 hours in. The lights might still be on, but the economy is already in cardiac arrest. And while you're worrying about money, there's someone in your family who's worrying about something far more urgent, something that can't be bought, bartered, or stockpiled. Let's talk about medicine. Chapter 3. T plus 24 hours. The invisible tether. 24 hours in, the situation has gone from concerning to undeniable. The power's out in most areas now. Cell towers are dropping like flies as their backup batteries die. The roads are a mess, some people fleeing, some people hoarding, everyone operating on incomplete information. And somewhere in your house, there's a small plastic bottle that's about to become the most important object in your world. Maybe it's insulin. Maybe it's blood pressure medication. Maybe it's the little white pills that keep someone's heart from beating itself to death. Doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it has an expiration date, and that date is a lot closer than you think. This is the pharmacological tether, and for millions of Americans, it's the invisible chain that limits every decision they'll make in the next 72 hours. Let me give you some numbers that should terrify you. 80% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the actual chemicals that make medications work, used in American drugs come from overseas. China, India, Europe. They arrive on cargo ships, get processed in factories, get packaged and distributed through the same just-in-time systems we talked about earlier. That supply chain is fragile in good times. In bad times, it doesn't exist. But it gets worse. Because even if you've got a stockpile of medication, even if you were smart enough to get a 90-day supply instead of the usual 30, you've got another problem. The cold chain. Insulin requires refrigeration. So do many antibiotics. So do immunosuppressants, some heart medications, certain hormone therapies. These drugs don't just stop working when they get warm. They break down. They become toxic. They turn from medicine into poison in a matter of hours. You think a blackout is bad? A brownout is worse. Brownouts are what happen when the grid is struggling, power fluctuating, voltage unstable, your refrigerator turning on and off a dozen times an hour. Every cycle degrades the medication inside a little more. By the time the power stabilizes, the drugs that were keeping your family member alive are useless. Now let's talk about the word stockpile. Preppers love this word. They've got stockpiles of food, stockpiles of ammo, stockpiles of water purification tablets. But when it comes to prescription medication, stockpiling is nearly impossible. Insurance companies won't let you fill a prescription early. Pharmacies are required by law to limit quantities. The system is designed, intentionally, to prevent hoarding, which is great for preventing drug abuse in normal times. In crisis times, it means most people are operating with a 2-week supply at best. 2 weeks sounds like a lot, until you realize that the supply chain takes 6 to 8 weeks to restore after a major disruption. Do the math. Here's the emotional hook, and I want you to sit with this for a second. You're fit. You can hike 10 miles with a pack. You've got your bug-out route planned, your rally points selected, your contingencies gamed out. You're a survivor. Can your father do that? Can your diabetic wife? Can your kid with asthma? At the 24-hour mark, the tether snaps. Your mobility is no longer defined by your cardiovascular fitness. It's defined by the operational life of a Coleman cooler keeping your mother's heart medication viable. Suddenly, bugging out isn't an option. Suddenly, your whole survival strategy is anchored to a specific location. The one with the generator, the one with the ice, the one where the medication can stay cold. This is why gray man theory only works for single, healthy individuals with no dependents. The moment you have someone in your circle who requires maintenance medication, you are no longer a mobile survivor. You are a stationary defender. Your strategy has to change completely.
And most preppers haven't made that adjustment. They've planned for a world where everyone in their group is young, healthy, and able to walk 30 miles on short notice. That world doesn't exist. Not in America. Not with our demographics. Not with our pharmaceutical dependency rates. The average American over 50 is on at least 4 prescription medications. That's not a statistic about weakness. That's a statistic about how thoroughly modern medicine has integrated itself into our biological operating system. We've outsourced parts of our survival to pills and injections. And when the supply chain fails, those parts fail too. So what do? First, you get realistic about who you're actually protecting. Not who you wish you were protecting, who you actually are responsible for. Second, you find a doctor. Now, before anything happens, who will work with you on extended prescriptions. They exist. They're not common, but they exist. You explain your concerns, you demonstrate that you're not seeking drugs for abuse, and you ask for a 90-day supply with a refill. You rotate stock, just like you'd rotate canned food. Third, you learn about alternatives. Not replacements. There is no herbal substitute for insulin, but management strategies. Dietary changes that reduce dependency. Exercise regimens that lower required doses. Ways to stretch a supply that was meant for 30 days into a supply that lasts 60. And fourth, you accept the anchor. If you've got dependence with medical needs, you build your strategy around that limitation instead of pretending it doesn't exist. A stationary defense with good resupply options beats a mobile fantasy that falls apart the moment grandma runs out of blood thinners. 24 hours in, the tether is real, and it's not going anywhere. But while you're focused on the medicine cabinet, there's something else in your house that's about to become a much bigger problem. Something that's been quietly accumulating since the power went out. It's time to talk about what's coming up through your pipes. Chapter 4. T plus 48 hours. The siege beneath your feet. 48 hours in. You've made it through the first 2 days. You've got water, you've got food, you've secured the perimeter, checked on the neighbors, established some kind of routine, and there's a smell. It's faint at first. You might mistake it for garbage or a dead animal somewhere in the neighborhood. But it's getting stronger, and it's coming from inside the house. Welcome to the most overlooked threat in every prepper's playbook, your own plumbing. Here's what everyone assumes about sewage systems. They're gravity-fed. Waste goes down. It flows through pipes to treatment plants. Simple physics, no electricity required. That assumption will kill you. In most American suburbs and in virtually every American city, sewage has to travel uphill at some point. Not through the whole system, but at key junctions where the terrain rises or where the pipes need to cross over other infrastructure. These uphill sections are managed by lift stations, electric lift stations. Pumps that run 24 hours a day, pushing waste up and over obstacles so that gravity can take it the rest of the way. When the power goes out, the pumps stop, and gravity does what gravity does. The system backs up. Not immediately, there's some buffer capacity in the pipes, but inevitably. Within 48 hours, depending on your position in the system, you start to see the effects. First, it's slow drains. Then, it's drains that don't drain at all. Then, if you're unlucky enough to live downhill from a lift station, it's sewage coming up through your basement drain, your shower drain, your toilet. You're not just dealing with your own waste, you're dealing with the waste of everyone uphill from you. Every flush, every sink drain, every kitchen garbage disposal for 3 blocks in every direction. It's all coming to you now. And here's the part that should really concern you. Waterborne disease. We like to think we've moved past the age of cholera and dysentery. Those are ancient diseases, diseases of history books and developing nations. We've got treatment plants and purification systems and 100 years of public health infrastructure protecting us. All of that infrastructure runs on electricity. During the siege of Sarajevo, which lasted almost 4 years in the 1990s, more civilians died from waterborne illness than from sniper fire. Not because they didn't understand hygiene, they were educated, modern Europeans, but because the systems that made hygiene possible had collapsed. People were drinking from contaminated sources because there was nothing else. People were getting sick from their own waste because there was nowhere for it to go.
Your modern American home is designed to push waste away from you. It's a pressure system, constantly maintaining negative pressure in the direction of the treatment plant. That pressure comes from the lift stations. Without power, your home becomes a biological containment unit, not containing threats from outside, containing the threat you create just by living in it. 2 people produce about 3 gallons of waste per day. That's urine, feces, and gray water from washing. In 3 days, that's nearly 10 gallons. Where's it going to go? If you're still flushing your toilets after the power's been out for 48 hours, you're not sending that waste away. You're sending it into an overloaded system that's going to push it right back at you, or at your neighbors downhill. So what do? First, you stop using your internal plumbing immediately after a power outage, not when it starts backing up. Before that, you switch to alternative waste management, and yes, that's a euphemism for digging a latrine in your backyard or setting up a bucket system with lime. Not glamorous, not fun. Absolutely necessary. Second, you seal your drains. Plug them, tape them, find some way to prevent backflow from entering your living space. The bathroom you never use? That drain is an open portal to the collective waste of your entire neighborhood. Third, you understand the disease vectors. Cholera comes from fecal contamination of drinking water. Dysentery comes from the same, plus poor hand hygiene. You need a sanitation protocol that keeps your water supply completely isolated from any waste, yours or anyone else's. Boiling helps. Purification tablets help. But the best defense is physical separation. Your drinking water comes from a source that has zero chance of contacting human waste. Zero. Not probably zero. Zero. Fourth, if you're in a suburban or urban environment and you have the option to relocate, the 48-hour mark is your decision point. The waste situation is only going to get worse. If you have somewhere else to go, somewhere with septic instead of sewer, somewhere with more space, somewhere uphill from the local infrastructure, this is when you leave. Not because of the looters, not because of the violence, because of the invisible tide rising beneath your feet. You're guarding your front door with a flashlight and a baseball bat, running scenarios about desperate strangers. Meanwhile, the real enemy has been quietly pooling in your basement since hour 24. History doesn't remember the heroes, it remembers the survivors, and survivors understand that the unglamorous threats, the ones that smell bad and make you squeamish, are the ones that actually kill. 48 hours in, your home is becoming a biohazard, and you've got one more challenge ahead of you, the biggest one, because the enemy isn't outside. It isn't in your pipes. It's been with you the whole time, and it's about to turn against you. Let's talk about your brain. Chapter 5, T plus 72 hours. The Caveman Override. 72 hours in. You've made it through 3 days. 3 days without reliable power. 3 days of constantly elevated stress. 3 days of broken sleep, hypervigilance, and the kind of decision-making that feels productive but mostly just burns energy. And here's the truth. You're not the same person you were 72 hours ago. Your hands shake a little now, even when you're not scared. Your thoughts race, jumping from threat to threat without settling on any of them. You keep forgetting things, where you put the flashlight, whether you lock the back door, what you ate this morning. Welcome to Condition Black. Your biology just staged a coup. Let's talk about what's happening inside your body, because this isn't weakness, this isn't cowardice, this is 10,000 years of evolutionary programming that's about to override everything you think you know. When you're under sustained stress, your adrenal glands dump cortisol into your bloodstream. Cortisol is useful in short bursts. It sharpens focus, suppresses pain, prepares you for physical conflict. But it's not designed for 72-hour deployments. After 3 days of elevated cortisol, your brain starts to change. The prefrontal cortex, the part that handles complex reasoning, long-term planning, impulse control, starts to shut down. Blood flow redirects to more primitive structures. The amygdala takes over. You're not thinking anymore, you're reacting. This is the caveman override, and it's about to make every problem you face significantly worse. Here's what happens to your body in Condition Black. When your heart rate exceeds about 145 beats per minute, which doesn't take much when you're sleep-deprived and cortisol-soaked, blood starts leaving your extremities. Your body is preparing for fight or flight. It's pulling resources from your fingers and toes and redirecting them to the major muscle groups. This is great if you need to run from a predator or throw a spear. It's terrible if you need to operate complex machinery. Fine motor skills degrade first. That combination lock on your gun safe, the one you've opened 1,000 times, your fingers won't work right. They'll fumble. They'll shake. The thing you could do blindfolded yesterday is now genuinely difficult. Then complex motor skills go. Reloading a firearm, operating a radio, driving a vehicle, tasks that require sequencing and coordination start to fall apart. Finally, cognitive processing collapses. Your IQ drops by 15 to 20 points. Your ability to assess threats accurately deteriorates. You start seeing patterns that aren't there and missing patterns that are. This is why combat veterans train obsessively. They're not just learning skills, they're building muscle memory so deep that it survives the cortisol flood. They're programming their bodies to perform when their brains check out. And here's the uncomfortable truth for most preppers. You haven't done that training. You've got a $3,000 rifle with a match-grade trigger that requires precise finger placement. You've got a security system with a 12-digit code. You've got a generator with a startup sequence that involves 3 switches and a choke adjustment. In condition black, you won't be able to use any of it. Your expensive gear becomes a liability. The more complex the system, the more likely it is to fail when you need it most. Not because the gear broke, but because your brain did. This is why professional operators choose simplicity over capability. They want fewer moving parts, larger buttons, more forgiving tolerances. They assume they'll be stupid, clumsy, and half blind when the moment comes, and they select their equipment accordingly. So what do? First, you understand the timeline. The 72-hour mark is critical because that's when most people's cognitive reserves are completely depleted. If you can make it through the first 3 days with your decision-making intact, you've beaten the curve. That means sleep. Real sleep. Not lying awake listening for threats. Actual restorative sleep, even if it's only 4 hours at a time. Even if you need someone else on watch to make it happen. It means food. Protein and fat especially. Your brain is burning glucose at an incredible rate trying to manage all this stress. If you're not eating enough, cognitive decline accelerates. It means doing less, not more. Every decision depletes your reserves. Every problem you try to solve uses up cognitive capital you can't replace. Triage ruthlessly. Handle the immediate threats, defer everything else, and resist the urge to stay busy. Second, you simplify your systems now before anything happens. That fancy combination lock? Replace it with a key lock. Keys work when fingers don't. That complex generator startup? Practice it until it's muscle memory, or get a generator with a 1-button start. That rifle with the match trigger? Maybe keep something with a heavier, more forgiving pull for emergencies. Something you can operate when you're shaking. The goal is to make your critical systems condition black compatible. Assume you'll be operating with the cognitive capacity of a frightened 12-year-old and design accordingly. Third, you recognize the symptoms in yourself and others. When someone in your group starts making irrational decisions, it's not because they're stupid or cowardly. It's because their prefrontal cortex has gone offline. They need rest, food, and someone else to take over decision-making for a while. When you catch yourself cycling through the same thoughts over and over, unable to settle on a course of action, that's a sign. When you notice your hands trembling, that's a sign. When you find yourself getting angry at small things, when your threat assessment becomes paranoid, when you can't remember what happened 2 hours ago, signs, all of them. The prepared individual isn't the one with the most gear. It's the one who understands their own limitations and works within them. You spent $3,000 on equipment designed for peak performance. But peak performance doesn't exist at hour 72. All that exists is degraded cognition, trembling hands, and the hope that whatever you bought is simple enough to use when you're running on fumes. Your biology is not your friend in a crisis. It's a legacy system optimized for a world that doesn't exist anymore. A world where threats were physical, immediate, and resolved in seconds. The modern crisis stretches for days or weeks. Your body wasn't designed for that. Nobody's was. 72 hours in, the final domino falls, and it was inside you the whole time. The conclusion: the silence before the silence. 5 failures, 72 hours. Hour 4, the algorithm crashes. Hour 12, the economy stutters. Hour 24, the medicine dies. Hour 48, the sewage rises. Hour 72, your brain surrenders. None of them dramatic, all of them invisible, all of them fatal if you're not ready. Here's what nobody wants to admit. You cannot buy a solution for these failures. No gear, no gadget, no Amazon cart. You can only think ahead. Systems thinking beats stockpiling every time. The preppers who survive aren't the ones with the most stuff. They're the ones who were 24 hours ahead while everyone else waited for day 1. So here's my question, and I want you to answer it in the comments. Which of these 5 failures would hit your household first? The supply chain, the pharmacy, the plumbing? Be honest, because honesty now is survival later. The lights are still on, the window is open. Don't prepare your bag, prepare your mind for the silence.